The moment you speak in an argument, you have already lost. Not because your point is wrong, not because the other person is smarter, but because speaking is a reaction, and reactions always come second. Power never moves second. Power waits, observes, and lets others reveal themselves. The need to respond is not confidence, it is discomfort. And discomfort is visible long before words are heard. Picture a familiar situation. Someone questions you publicly. They accuse, provoke, or subtly disrespect you. Instantly, your body leans forward. Your mind starts assembling explanations. You want to clarify, correct, defend. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like strength. But what you are actually doing is volunteering to step inside a frame you did not create. And once you enter someone else's frame, you are already playing from underneath. This trap works because it is biological. When your status feels threatened, your nervous system interprets it as danger. The heart rate shifts. Breathing tightens. The mind narrows. Speech becomes the fastest escape route. Talking relieves pressure. Silence intensifies it. So you speak, not to win, but to feel safe again. And the person who made the accusation feels it immediately. They feel the shift of gravity away from you and toward them. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never learn. Arguments are not about truth. They are about positioning. Whoever explains is positioning themselves as the one who needs approval. Whoever clarifies is accepting the assumption that something is unclear. Whoever defends is agreeing that an attack was justified. These signals are subtle, but the human brain is trained to detect them instantly. Before logic enters the room, hierarchy has already been decided. This is why thinkers like Niccolò Machiavelli understood something most modern advice avoids. Power is not moral. It is perceptual. It does not reward honesty. It rewards control. And control is never loud. Control is measured by who feels the need to move first. The one who speaks under pressure is not asserting dominance, they are leaking it. At this point, a division quietly forms. On one side are reactive people, those who believe respect is earned by explaining themselves clearly. On the other side are observers, those who understand that respect is assumed until surrendered. The difference is not intelligence, it is emotional positioning. Reactive people rush to close tension. Observers let tension do the work for them. Silence, in this context, is not passivity, it is refusal. Refusal to accept the premise, refusal to chase understanding, refusal to justify existence. When you do not speak, the other person is forced to carry the weight of their own words. They hear themselves, they feel the imbalance, and slowly, often unconsciously, they begin to repair it by talking more, softening, or retreating. This is where the old identity begins to fail you. The version of you that believed clarity equals strength must disappear. Because what you are about to learn has nothing to do with communication and everything to do with pressure. Speaking releases it. Silence concentrates it. And once you understand how pressure works in human interaction, you stop trying to win arguments. You let them collapse on their own, which is where real control begins and exactly where the next part continues. Once you understand that speaking releases pressure, silence takes on an entirely different meaning. It is no longer something you endure, it becomes something you deploy. Silence is not the absence of action, it is the presence of restraint. And restraint in social dynamics is interpreted as confidence because it signals that you are not under threat. People only rush to speak when they feel exposed. Silence suggests immunity. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with unfilled space. When conversation pauses, the mind searches for resolution. It wants to restore balance. In an argument, silence removes that balance and transfers the discomfort to the other person. They begin to question themselves. Did they overstep? Did they misjudge you? Are they losing control of the interaction? None of this requires you to say a word. The psychological work happens automatically. As silence stretches, something predictable occurs. The other person talks more. Their sentences become longer. Their tone shifts. They begin to justify, explain, soften, or repeat themselves. This is not confidence expanding. It is pressure leaking. The very behaviors people use to defend themselves are now being mirrored back at them. You are no longer the one under evaluation. They are. This is how frame control operates. The moment you respond verbally, you accept the frame that was offered to you. You acknowledge the accusation. You legitimize the challenge. Silence does the opposite. It rejects the frame entirely. It says, without words, that the premise does not deserve engagement. And when a premise is not engaged, it collapses. People cannot maintain authority over something that receives no confirmation. This is why denial is almost always weaker than indifference. Denial implies that something must be corrected. Indifference implies that nothing meaningful has occurred. When you refuse to react, you refuse to assign value. And value is the currency of social power. Attention is expensive. Silence withholds it. That withholding is felt immediately, even if it cannot be articulated. At this stage, the power dynamic reverses. The speaker begins to chase. They look for reassurance, validation, or resistance. Anything that confirms the interaction still exists. You, meanwhile, remain still. Not rigid, not defensive. Simply unmoved. This stillness communicates a dangerous message, that their words are optional. And when someone's words become optional, their influence shrinks. Most people misinterpret this effect because they believe power must be visible to be real. They expect dominance to look like force. But silence is force without friction. It creates gravity instead of impact. The other person feels drawn into the void they created, trying to fill it, trying to stabilize it, unaware that every attempt weakens their position further. However, this weapon is useless without internal alignment. If silence is performed while your mind is racing, it leaks. People sense it. True silence requires inner stillness, the absence of urgency, the absence of emotional pull. Without that, silence becomes tension. With it, silence becomes authority. And this is where most people fail, because the real battle is not external, it is internal, which is exactly where the next part begins. The reason silence fails for most people has nothing to do with technique. It fails because their inner world is still noisy. Their thoughts are racing, their identity feels threatened, and their ego is begging for resolution. From the outside, they may appear calm, but internally, they are pleading to be understood. And that internal pleading leaks through posture, micro-expressions, breathing, and timing. Silence without inner dominance is not power. It is delayed submission. Words pull you in because your identity is attached to being seen a certain way. Competent, fair, intelligent, respectable. When someone challenges that image, the mind rushes to repair it. This is the real vulnerability, not the accusation itself, but the need to correct perception. The moment you need to be understood, you give the other person leverage, because now they control whether understanding is granted or withheld. Inner dominance begins when you stop protecting your image. When an accusation lands and you do not rush to remove it, something unusual happens. The accusation loses energy. It hangs in the air with no resistance to push against. This is not weakness. It is ownership. You allow perceptions to exist without negotiating them. And paradoxically, the less you try to defend who you are, the more solid your presence becomes. This requires a quiet but radical shift, separating your self-worth from external interpretation. You are not what people say. You are not even what people believe. You are what remains stable regardless of interpretation. Once this detachment forms, emotional hooks stop working. Insults feel dull. Provocations feel irrelevant. Silence stops being an effort and becomes the natural response of someone who does not feel cornered. Most people think emotional control means suppression. It does not. Suppression creates tension. Dominance creates neutrality. You acknowledge emotions without obeying them. The urge to respond still appears, but it no longer commands action. This is the moment you become unreadable. And unreadability is deeply unsettling to people who rely on predictable reactions to feel powerful. Predictability is the real weakness in social conflict. When people know how you will react, they control timing, pressure, and escalation. Emotional reactions make you linear. Inner dominance breaks that pattern. Silence becomes effortless because there is nothing to resolve internally. You are not waiting to speak. You are simply not pulled. This inner state produces a subtle external effect. Your stillness feels heavy. Your presence slows the interaction. Others begin to adjust themselves around you, often without realizing why. They soften their tone. They reframe their statements. They try to regain balance. What they are responding to is not your silence. It is your lack of need. Needlessness reads as authority because it signals that you are not operating from scarcity. Once inner dominance is established, silence stops being situational and becomes structural. It is no longer something you choose in arguments. It is how you move through interaction. And when this happens, arguments themselves change. People hesitate before challenging you. They choose their words carefully. They sense that engagement carries weight. This is no longer about winning exchanges. It is about making challenges feel costly before they even begin, which is where the final transformation takes place. When inner dominance stabilizes, something subtle but decisive changes in how others relate to you. Arguments no longer arrive fully formed. They hesitate. They soften before impact. People sense friction in advance and adjust their behavior to avoid it. This is not because you have become intimidating in the obvious sense. It is because engaging you now feels inefficient. And humans instinctively avoid interactions that promise no payoff. At this stage, silence is no longer a tactic used only in moments of conflict. It becomes your default posture. You speak when speaking compounds influence. You remain silent when silence compounds pressure. This selectivity creates a pattern others recognize long before they can name it. They learn that challenging you does not produce reaction, clarity, or emotional access. It produces uncertainty, and uncertainty is expensive to maintain. This is how people lose without realizing they are losing. They enter an interaction expecting exchange and leave carrying the weight alone. They fill space you did not open. They justify positions you never questioned. They negotiate against themselves because there is no resistance to measure against. From the outside, nothing dramatic happens. From the inside, hierarchy quietly rearranges itself. The power here aligns precisely with the thinking of Niccolò Machiavelli, who understood that overt dominance invites opposition, but quiet inevitability dissolves it. When outcomes feel unavoidable, people stop contesting them. They adapt instead. Your silence contributes to this inevitability by removing all visible points of leverage. There is nothing to push against, nothing to provoke, nothing to negotiate. As this pattern repeats, social positioning recalibrates. People begin to preemptively align. They adjust tone before you respond. They frame statements more carefully. They seek approval indirectly rather than challenge directly. None of this is requested. None of it is enforced. It emerges naturally when someone consistently refuses to trade emotional access for temporary resolution. This is power without aggression. There is no need to correct, confront, or dominate. In fact, doing so would weaken the position. Aggression signals investment, silence signals surplus. When you do not need to win an argument, you are perceived as someone who already has, and perception, not performance, is what governs social authority. To lock this in, there is a simple operating rule. Never explain unless asked, and even then, only briefly. Explanation is a concession. It invites evaluation. You are not inaccessible, but you are selective. This boundary conditions others to approach you differently. They learn that access is earned through relevance, not demanded through pressure. This is the final distinction. You are no longer trying to win arguments. You are removing the conditions that make arguments viable in the first place. Silence is no longer a response. It is an environment. And in that environment, others regulate themselves. They speak carefully. They move cautiously. They choose alignment over friction. That is winning without speaking a word. Not because you outplayed them, but because you made resistance feel unnecessary.